Hi, my name is Rachel Honda from Straitjacket Podcast.
I'm Jeff from Mental Health Resource.
And my name is Yesmeen, and I am an intern therapist here at Trust.
Yay. So, Yesmeen, what got you into this field? And maybe just tell us a little bit about yourself in general.
Well, I think that anyone who's a therapist or decides, it's like there are so many different things that we experience that kind of gets you on this path. I always like to, a professor of mine said that she feels like becoming a therapist isn't really a job as it is a vocation. So it is really like this feeling of being called to be of service in a way. I had my own experiences growing up. So I lost my mother when I was 12 and kind of got lost in the mental health system a bit. And then, kind of things happen along the way into young adulthood. But as I entered my 30s, I realized that a lot of things or a lot of behavior patterns that I have or like issues in my own relationships are based on kind of my upbringing and experience. And I really wanted to help in some way. And originally I did want to do adolescence. So that was my big thing when I first started to come into therapy is I want to work with kids. But kind of one thing led to the next, and here I am, and I love it. So it kind of works out.
And why did you want to work with adolescents initially?
Because directly when I was a kid, I never felt heard or seen in a lot of ways, and I wanted to be that person for someone, for a little one. And I just love kids. And I'm like a big kid, so it kind of works out. I'm always sitting on the floor and like rolling around, and so yeah, that was my original thought.
Yeah. And that's true. All of us want to be seen and heard. So a little bit more about your background.
So my undergrad is in theater performance. So I used to be an actor, stage actor. And that was where I kind of learned how, there was this moment in school where we learned that there are no bad characters. There's no evil characters. And the idea is that everyone has a backstory. And that the more we learn about a character or a person, the more we can see why they are and they act and that they kind of
I totally agree with that.
Mm-hmm.
It's like The Sopranos.
Just like The Sopranos.
Yeah. That's like my favorite show of all time.
Okay,
good.
Yeah. It's like he's like really like you really like the character, but then at the end of the day, like if you look at it like what he's doing currently, like he's a bad dude. But I guess it's like they kind of take that therapy approach and it's like you get to know the guy. And you're like, okay,
you can understand why.
Yeah, you like have empathy towards him.
Because think about it, no one wakes up in the morning and they're like, you know what, I'm gonna be a jerk today, right? Like that's just not like, you know what, I'm mad at everyone and everything. There's a reason that our brain goes to that. So that really stuck with me when I was an undergrad. And then as I kind of traveled and I started my current master's degree, so I'm getting my marriage and family therapy. Yeah. Master's, yay. But that kind of that insight onto how we can look at other people as like in a sense characters, right? Like we're all characters in our own play, and why are we the characters that we are? And then can we change what we want our story to look like? So that's something that's from narrative therapy. I didn't make that up, but I love it. I think it's really applicable in this industry.
Very true. So how have you used it with other people?
It's made me a much softer person. Mm-hmm. So if we can kind of zoom the lens out when we have interactions with people, and this is what I learned, it's like when I think that someone is maybe being mean to me, or if I'm like even on the road and someone's doing road rage, or if I have like maybe an uncomfortable interaction with someone, or if maybe they're like being aggressive or I'm like perceiving them as, kind of, or what this, like learning this and having this perspective has made me more empathetic and understanding. And it honestly has made my life easier. Yeah. Like having that perspective when you meet new people or when you have interactions or like when you see people fighting, or it's like there's other things that were happening to that person before we're seeing the surface.
Like all these events led up to this moment. Mm-hmm. And it's like, there's like a crash.
Yeah. So it's like, I wonder like I don't know. I really feel like it's benefited me as an individual because things don't bother me as much as they used to.
Mm-hmm.
I don't take things personally.
Yeah, that's huge. And when you approach things with compassion, it's like, okay, like you said, you see them more for like they're being human, basically.
Yeah.
So it's just, I understand that like yoga's like, and like that type of stuff is like a big part of your like modalities, I guess you call it, right?
Yes. So I always forget about that. So it's actually funny because I feel like, so I've been teaching yoga for like 7 or 8 years now.
How'd you start into that?
When I was in high school, my stepmom used to take me. And what was kind of fun about the experience I had is that the studio we went to was a man from India who's like a true Hindu, like celibate. His classes were very specific on, it is about the
Like
yoga.
spiritual.
Yes. So there's no like bumping music or like
It wasn't hot yoga or anything like that.
it was a hot in there, but it wasn't like, the only sounds that we had was him cueing in Sanskrit and like a breathing machine, just to hear like the breath, so that we all end up like following the same breath pattern.
That's interesting.
Because when you do a yoga, an asana practice of flow, it's the idea is every posture is moving to your inhale or your exhale.
Yeah.
And they're specific. So it's like inhale, mountain pose, exhale, forward fold. So there's specific breath patterns for it. And I learned all that. And I was like, wow, this is so cool.
Yeah.
And I took that. And then when I was in my like mid 20s, I got a job as a mental health and wellness supervisor at a Girl Scout camp in Colorado. My favorite job. The most fun. It was so much fun. At first, it's very overwhelming because you're like, wow, every week I have between 96 and 121 new kiddos, running around. And what I learned at Girl Scout camp is that parents really like to see if their kids are going to do okay without their medication while they're at camp. So they'll just send them to camp without their antidepressants or without their sleep medications or without their Adderall. And these are like 7 to 14-year-olds. So their bodies start going through it.
Yeah.
Right? And then they're withdrawing. They don't know what's going on. They're confused. And they start to get really stressed out. Plus,
especially the antidepressant stuff, like that's really dangerous.
Yes. Not a choice I would personally make as a parent. But I'm not a parent yet, so maybe I'll change my mind. But I don't think so. But they would start like kind of going through it. Plus they're homesick. Plus there's like, girls are, I can't find my glitter. I swear to God, my roommate took it, and there's all these things. So my job is to literally like find holistic ways to keep everyone chill enough, happy enough that they have the best week at camp ever. So I really tuned into the yoga and meditation and mindfulness. And so 7 a.m. and it's kind of cool because it was volunteer. Like the girls don't have to get up at 6:30 to go to yoga at 7 a.m., But a lot of them chose to get up an hour early and they would tell me, wow, I feel so much better. Like,
how old were they?
The mainly 7, 8, 9-year-olds.
Wow.
Yeah.
They had that much insight.
And they were
crazy.
like, I'll never forget this moment where we're all like sitting on our, on our yoga mats and they're all like sleepy and they're like, kind of like fidgety. And we're in the mountains. And at some point, maybe like a couple minutes in, you could see how like each girl, how she kind of like would just like settle, and it was just so sweet. I'm like, wow.
That's
Especially
hilarious.
at that age.
Yeah. So that was kind of where I was like, okay, there is some therapeutic value to this. And then kind of continuing on, I teach here in California, and then I teach privates, and then I also teach at an IOP in Huntington Beach. So I kind of got to practice on them for the last 3.5 years, But yeah, they keep coming back and they keep showing up and they keep me around. So things that I pull into session as well, like with individual clients, because a lot of times it's this, like it's the what from our previous experiences are impacting us in this present moment. Originally, yoga this is just from the information that I have. It started off as just one posture, and it was a seated posture, and the whole reason for it is really for meditation. So even in our version of it, physical practice is just to prep the body for meditation. That is the main goal.
So the goal of yoga is to prep for meditation.
That is the original. So like, yes, you're moving your body, and there's a lot of reference to like, why do we want to be flexible in our bodies? Other than injury, all that stuff, like what's the point? And the idea is, I don't know if you guys know, like the end posture of most asana practices is corpse pose, shavasana.
I don't know.
What
Okay.
is it? Which
So
one is it?
the one where you're like just lying on the ground,
Oh yeah,
doing
yeah.
nothing at the very end. Okay.
Yeah, with your legs crossed. Right.
So if you're just like you're lying like a starfish or something, I don't know. how
Oh,
you
you're
do it.
lying. You're
Just
literally.
lying on the ground. It's
That's
called
how That's how you're
shavasana.
supposed to meditate, is lying down or like sitting up.
No, sitting up because you want your spine to be straight. But at the end of a physical yogic practice, generally you you complete your circle of practice in shavasana,
Okay.
which is called corpse pose.
Okay.
And so the reason that is because when you hear the word corpse pose, it sounds like a little morbid,
Yeah.
right? But the reason is that every time we do a yogic practice, an asana, breath to movement, that the way that you move your body and the way you're able to control your breath represents and reflects how you are living your life. It represents a life cycle for us. So at the end of that physical practice, that life cycle, you end in shavasana, which is corpse pose, and it represents that sleep in between lives because rebirth, reincarnation, right? So the idea is that after every round, every flow, when you take that moment to truly allow your mind to rest and be still, it's like you're that little sleep in between lives, and then when you come back up, it's an opportunity to start new again. So like you had your life, you had your sleep, and now you can see, how do I want to change the way I interact? So I'm flexible in body so that I can be flexible in mind. But originally it is for the meditation purposes.
So each yoga session is supposed to be like a life cycle.
If you look at it like that, you can.
Interesting.
Because the idea is if I have a hard time keeping my mind focused, and if the way that I'm able or unable to control my breath impacts my mind, then that's maybe how I react to things in real life, off the mat.
Right.
And what are the kind of benefits that you've seen from yoga or like these type of teachings in mental health, in like the mental health realm?
Staying present is really difficult. How often am I present throughout my day? Honestly, probably not very much. And sometimes I feel quite hypocritical for like preaching it in session or like teaching yoga, and then I'm like in the car thinking about God only knows what. But I think what is helpful is that it allows you to be mindful and create space. So when we're able to be mindful of our bodies and of our minds, then when we find ourselves in uncomfortable situations, or when we feel like we're having a reaction or our mind starts to run, if we're practicing being present for an hour a day or 2 hours a week, or maybe even if it's an hour-long class and maybe a combination of like 15 minutes, we're practicing how to be present. So if we can practice when we're in like a fun yoga room, or when we're like even driving our car, and then when you're in session, or when you're then kind of moving around outside, right? It's just helping you stay present and not letting previous experiences impact your present state.
Yeah, and it really is a practice because even just 5 minutes can feel like forever at times, especially with clients in the beginning. So in your sessions, like, is there a certain time where it really stood out to you, where you knew like, okay, this is helping them?
Yes, and I always ask because sometimes it's like, because I observe something doesn't mean that it's true for them.
Right.
So, for example, this past week has actually been, because sometimes I struggle as an aspiring clinician because I kind of battle this with myself of like, okay, I'm a yoga teacher and I'm a hopeful therapist, right? But it's like, how much of it am I bringing in because it's my comfort zone right? Or how much am I bringing into that session because it is helpful? And I think it's been helpful.
Yeah.
And a big part of it is sometimes, particularly in session, and especially if like I don't know someone that well, right? Like if you look on the outside, therapy's kind of crazy. Like,
like tell me everything.
I just met you. Tell me all your childhood trauma. You know what I mean? And sometimes there's a reaction, or they come in and they're like, "I got nothing." Okay, that's okay. You don't have to talk all the time. Or if I can see them getting like really upset. I'll say, okay, let's bring ourselves back to where we are right now. Right. Like we are in this room, you're sitting in a chair. You know, if we can objectively look at what is actually happening and take out all the subtext, I've seen people be able to kind of lower their emotional response. Or just be able to kind of like give space between whatever that, especially with trauma, like PTSD or like specific traumas. It just allows them to put space because unfortunately, depending on the severity, it like lives in it seems like it lives in their body, right? And then they start to talk about it and their palms are sweating, they start shaking. It's like, okay, let's just like kind of practice being mindful, and hopefully, ideally, eventually it will invoke a feeling of safety.
And that's super helpful, I think, because so many people don't know how to regulate, and yoga, meditation, all these holistic practices teach you how. How do you go back to baseline? And so when the client's like resistant to any of this, how do you work with that? And this goes for any of your yoga classes or sessions.
Sometimes people are resistant, and it makes sense. Especially, I feel like there is a category of male clients that's like, that's dumb. Like, I'm like, okay. And I say, listen, it might be dumb, but if we kind of look at it, like people have been doing this for tens of thousands of years, so it might not be super dumb. But also, I always ask, I'm like, here's the reality. You're in a rehab. You're not here because all the things that you were doing before have worked out really well for you.
Right.
Like otherwise you wouldn't be here. And listen, I want you to go out and prosper. But maybe there's something that you haven't tried that you might find benefit from. So I'm not asking you to become a yoga master or like meditate every day for 20 minutes a day or whatever. Like we're just in this moment and in the therapeutic space. This is time for us to maybe like rehearse or practice things that you can then apply in your own time out and about. And I always say it's confidential, so I can't tell anyone, you know, that you're meditating in the office. So that kind of works. That's how I approach it. And so far, so good. So.
Yeah.
How do you like teach people to meditate?
So there's a variety of ways. Depending on who it is, I usually I'm comfortable guiding meditation. It's just like, it's second nature to me at this point. But sometimes if they are comfortable sitting, we'll do that. But some, I can tell sometimes they like can't quite, or have like their back hurts, or they have these like aches and pains, and then this is new. So when I'm stressed out, or if I feel like I'm dysregulated, something I do at home is I'll lie on my back and I'll put my feet on the chair or on the wall. So I'm like a little upside down L, or my feet will be kind of hanging out. So I do that at home when I'm like, you know, I can like feel the walls closing in. So, sometimes things will be a little intense. I'm like, all right, let's pop off our chairs. Let's lie on the ground and we put our feet on a chair or on a wall, and there's something nice about having the blood flow.
Yeah.
You know, kind of reverse it a little bit, that I find is really helpful. But we'll always start. I'll say, if you're comfortable, you can close your eyes. And I am not like a specialist in any particular type of interventions at this point or modalities. But like allowing them trying to help them, like guide them, use your breath as a tool, relax the muscles in your face. What is your jaw doing? And then we kind of bring awareness. And then, all right, so as we inhale and exhale, you're going to use your breath as a tool to find those places and spaces in your body that you're holding on to discomfort or tightness or tension. And then we'll hover it there. And then we'll say, okay, can you describe what does it feel like in that space? Can you use their temperature? Is it relaxed? Okay, if we focus the breath on there, on that space, how does that change it? Does it change it? And then trying to like associate the feeling in their physical body. And then, okay, while we're here in that space that's uncomfortable, what do you think about? What emotions do you experience? How does it make you feel? Do you notice like just like different things, and just being really curious? And sometimes, and it seems that that really helps, because it's not like we're not trying to get away with, like, get rid of it. We're just bringing awareness and being present with ourselves in those spaces. And how does that make us feel? So
they're learning not to run away from things, but to sit with the uncomfortable feelings. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that. I like it because it ties in with like other therapies that we hear about, like DBT, CBT, somatic therapy, all of it combined. So awesome. So how does shadow work and psychodynamic therapy, like how does that all tie in, or does it tie in?
What is shadow work? I don't even know specifically.
Shadow work was by Carl Jung.
Okay, that's like the big book guy, right?
Carl Jung's the red book. It's like
German.
It's huge.
Carl Jung.
Yeah.
Jungian theory. Yeah. I actually listened to a really good podcast that covers it. I can't remember what it's called. I'll think about it. But the idea is that, so there's multiple steps to shadow work, and it is kind of like the original, so I've read, where IFS kind of gets its theory from. So with shadow work, it's the idea that as we're growing up, we're little. I'm very interested in how, when we're small, how it impacts us now. So, like, for example, say I was like super talkative when I was a kid, and I was like really opinionated, and I was like always raising my hand and just very active in my classroom. And then I had a teacher or students that are like, hey, you talk a lot. Like, why are you so annoying? Why do you talk so much? Why do you have so many opinions? You're like, oh, you're just... So that is who I am naturally, as Yesmeen, is like talkative and outgoing. But then I have all these things that are said to me, and I want to have friends, and I want my teachers to like me. So I stopped doing those things. And then I kind of compress that in the back of my mind. And then as I get older, I notice, because I'm more quiet, I'm maybe more passive, maybe I take on more of that good girl framework, then I hold on to that. But that doesn't mean that that part of me that wants to be outgoing and like wild doesn't exist. So she's still there. Like, that part of me is still there. So I continue, and I get older, and I go to college, and I do well, and I get great grades, and I still stay quiet. And then I get my first job, and I meet another woman who is super outgoing, shares her opinions. And I meet her, and I'm like, I do not like her. She's annoying. She's so outgoing. She's so talkative. Why is she like that? Oh, and why do I have that opinion?
Projecting.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So the idea is that in shadow work, we have these different parts of us, and it can be with anything, but that we sometimes shove them in the back of our minds. And then as we get older, we start projecting what we want to have or what we wish we weren't protecting. And then it comes out sometimes as anger or aggression on other people. Huh. I mean, that could be a lot of ways. And a lot of it is like from our caretakers or from different roles, caretakers, teachers, and they can be positive things too, right? The shadow isn't always bad. But then taking the time to, okay, what is a shadow of mine? Why do I think that about myself? Why am I not allowed to be a certain way? And then kind of tying that back into finding ways to get closer to our authentic selves.
Like, where did the beliefs come from? And now digging into it so we're not fighting against ourselves, pretty much, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
Yeah. I mean, with shadow work, like, have you seen success with it in sessions with your clients?
The shadow work is very resistant. It's very resistant because for many ways. It's one of those things where I'll provide the psychoeducation and we'll maybe do a couple of things in session, but it's, from what I've noticed, it's something that when a client takes it home with them, and they are able to process it in a more safe space where they don't have to give me the details. I always tell them, I'm like, you don't have to tell me anything, right? It's more about what's happening for you in your mind. So there is how I've seen it be really useful for people. And again, I feel like a big, like a theme that I've noticed is like when we're able to create space. So it's like, maybe I'm going to be nice for this person. Or a big thing I notice with shadow work is when people are upset with other people for being victims. They're like, I had a hard time. I did it. Why can't you? Suck it up. Get over it. Why is it taking you so long? You know? It's like, wait, why am I like that? Oh, it's because I never felt like I could ask for help when I was a kid.
Yeah. Or no one was there to help.
No one was there to help me. So why should I have to help you? No one helped me. So it just broadens that lens of kind of humanity and compassion.
Yeah, I feel like that's just humanity in a sense. You know, I mean, a lot of people kind of, it seems like they're always put themselves first, you know, or at least often. And I mean, I don't know if I'd necessarily disagree with it, you know.
Disagree with what?
Just like people like putting themselves first.
I
Get what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That shadow work journal, that you shared with some clients. I love that.
Isn't that fun?
Who is that by? I don't remember.
It is a female author, but I don't know off the top of my head.
Yeah, that one's really good. I think it's because it asks clients, and that I can see why it would be resistant, or people would be resistant, because it keeps asking to dig deeper. And if people aren't ready for that, then they're like, oh, I don't want to work on this yet, or I don't want to approach this. So do you see a tie with shadow work and the holistic methods that you use, or are they completely different modalities?
It's a good question. I think you can always find similarities when you're trying to reach the same outcome for things.
Yeah.
So I think that a big part of shadow work is having access to mindfulness. Because if we are unable to be mindful and be present when we're trying to figure out why we think a certain way, I don't think we're ever going to be able to get there.
Right.
Because if I'm like, okay, I'm really angry about something right now, but I just keep thinking about my upbringing, or I keep thinking about the car ride over here, how can I ever really know what is actually causing my emotions or my reactions in that moment?
Sure.
So I think so far it's about slowing down our thoughts and the interactions, and having introducing and inviting mindfulness into our daily lives, then maybe makes other things that are deeper more accessible.
Mm-hmm.
How does one of the shadow work sessions usually look?
So they have a workbook, or they have different questions that we ask. So it can be in different ways. So part of it can be, I'm trying to think, I ran a group not too long ago. I'll have people look at a list of things. So different defense mechanisms, for example. So avoidance as a defense mechanism. Why do I avoid things? And you'll say, okay, like of these avoidance skills, like where do you fall on? Like, do you stonewall your partner? Do you not make an appointment that you need to make? Do you ignore your dad's phone calls, right? So it's these little things that we do that could be seen as avoidance. And then, okay, well, why do you avoid? Oh, I just procrastinate. I'm just lazy. Could be. But usually that's not actually why you're avoiding something. So then we'll sit there and we'll say, okay, like where did you learn? Like who else in your life? Because I like relationships. I think they're important. So I say, okay, well, where did you learn to avoid things from? Have you seen other people in your life avoid things? Did your parents procrastinate? Did your siblings avoid? Like, what did that look like when you were growing up? And you can kind of pinpoint. And oftentimes, avoidance in a shadow work skill ends up being someone's so insecure that whatever they try and do, they're never going to be good enough. And so they just don't even want to bother. They have a catastrophizing thinking, right? So it's like, well, I learned that even when I would try and get things done, or I would try and accomplish things when I was growing up, it was still never good enough for my parents. So I don't even bother anymore. So it's interesting, like a lot of it always ends up kind of being, I know I hate to say it, but like a lot of our present internal issues are from our caretakers in some way or lack
feel like
of.
all of them.
I can't say all, right? I can't overgeneralize, but
It seems
A
like
lot. Or people, from our upbringing. So in some way, like school or at the home.
But then at some point, like we're also adults now, so we have to decide
what are we going to do about it now?
You have to fit. Yeah.
It's like it doesn't matter. Like, I mean, not that it doesn't matter, but like, okay, your parents abandoned you, they neglected you, you didn't have access to food or water, right? Like your basic needs weren't met, and that is awful, and that is like, no person should go through that, but you did, and you're here, so that is showing resilience. So we can take time to say, okay, we see why an individual acts and believes the things about themselves and the world that they do, but then can we take that information and then find a way to move forward in a way that's going to benefit you in your life?
Yeah. It's true. Like we may not always have caused the problems, but we still are the ones who have to deal with it at the end of the day. And I think that's where not only the shadow work, but I think that's where the holistic methods, like you said, could come in.
Because it's being present.
Yeah. And also it's like, I don't think people sit there and reflect as much unless they're doing therapy or some sort of journaling, self-reflection, any of that. So
That's what I've noticed. Like I was doing just therapy for the longest time. And then like I wasn't really like getting like happy, or I was like, it seems like I was just like emptying everything out. But then I like started adding like, meditation. Like I have like a meditation like coach pretty much. And then like that's when I actually started to like feel better, because I was like emptying out all the bad stuff and then replacing it with good stuff is the way I was looking at
you're
it.
putting it into action then.
I don't know. I was just looking at it as like a positive and a negative. Like the therapy is like, because I mean, in therapy, it does seem like a lot of it is focused on like negative stuff, right? Like, this happened, that, or like, you're kind of like talking through bad stuff, right? But then like, you add like you're emptying out all those like feelings, but then, I feel like if you do that and you're not replacing it with something good, like you just kind of feel empty. So then I just felt kind of like bland. Like if a straight line was like my base, like I was like slightly under a straight line.
Well, it's almost like what happens if maybe instead of trying to replace the negative, it's reframing them. Because then you can kind of like skip out on that whole void process, right? Like I don't have to feel empty to then replace something. But if I can reframe, like, I don't want to put you on the spot, but like what is something that you feel like negatively you had to get rid of or that you were dumping?
What do you mean?
Like
Like
therapy.
in my therapy? Oh man, I had like so much different stuff.
Just like a little one that you don't mind sharing.
Well, I was adopted, and my mother passed away when I was like young, like a little bit younger than when yours did, at like 9. So it's like that's like, of course, the center of something that caused a slew of other issues, basically.
Yeah.
So it's like, I've done therapy for so long, and I've like always had to basically like work on this like these couple things.
It goes
right?
back to that.
Like my biological parents, and then like my adoptive parents, and then like my mother who passed away. So like it's just, I did a lot of work with like IFS with like a therapist, and then I don't know though, like I was doing it, like I felt like really like down for like, I don't know, like probably like a month and a half. Like it's like, but I was doing the work, like I was like putting in hard work, in the therapy. Like, I wasn't just like neglecting it. I was being honest pretty much. And And then like I just didn't really like there wasn't like a actual shift, like shift and like with me cognitively, like where I actually like, you know, if like this was the line, I was like up here, right? There wasn't really a shift cognitively until I started with like a meditation coach too.
Was your therapist like telling you like at the end of session, would she just like process through stuff, and then would she give you any like assignments or talk about like, hey,
so for
here's what you
IFS,
can do with it?
it was just kind of like more like talking to like your parts. It's like similar to the shadow work, right? It's just like, you know, you found this part, and it's like you found, for me, mine was like an exile, right? So it was like we found this part that was like, mine was like physically within my mind, like trapped behind like a wall basically. And then like, you know, you get to know the part a little bit, but it's like the part still doesn't really want to, you know, have a relationship with you or like yourself, because it's like it was behind a wall for so long, like for whatever reason. And I did all this work with it and like kind of like got it to come out, but it like the part that like didn't want to, like I had even like more success within the therapy itself when like I started like doing more positive stuff too. Like it just like created a shift. It was like so strange.
It's the little things that make up the big picture.
I swear, like it was like the same, like, so I went to rehab when I was, you know, over 11 years ago. It was like kind of the same thing. Like I was doing like a lot of like serious like therapy. That was like the first time I was really like seriously doing therapy, right? Like I'd had therapists before, but like I was on drugs and I'd kind of like lie to them. But then like there's this one that like I found and that I was honest with, and then so like that was working. But like at the same time, like on that same like line, I was also doing gratitude work. You know, like a lot of like gratitude lists, gratitude work, meditation. I think it was bio neurofeedback. So it was like a bunch of like, it was like I was emptying out, but like this particular therapist, a lot of it was writing. So like it was like a similar thing to like the shadow work, but it was, I would like write to like, you know, like my biological mother, or like my mother that passed away, and like, you know, it would start off like kind of like understanding, but not really understanding why I understand, and then like eventually would kind of get like angry, and then eventually after the anger would kind of be like, you know, somewhat of like a, I don't really know. I don't even really, it's hard for me to pinpoint like what it was like with the conclusion. It wasn't necessarily empathy, but it was something else. Well, or understanding. It was like,
I think it's and I can't speak for you and your experience, of course, but there is something about being able to reframe an experience that's going to benefit you now, any of us. So like when I look at losing my own mother, right, to cancer, and like kind of watching that process, and it's really horrible, right? Like it sucks. Sure it was bad. It sucks, mega sucks. Would not recommend, but it happens to a lot of people. So it's like that could have been a moment. Like I'm an only child, and like I didn't have a lot of friends, and like I got picked on because I looked different from other people. Like I went to a very white Catholic school, like, and at the time it felt really isolating. But when I was able to change my frame of like, what is it costing me to be this upset over this?
Right.
What's
it costing me? Everything costs something. So like right now, this podcast, this is costing me my time. But for me, this is worth it, right? So like this is worthy of my time. Yeah. But when I had these experiences growing up, and I was holding on to all this anger and resentment and like regrets on what I did and did not talk with my mom about because I didn't know she was going to die, right? All that I was holding on to, and at some point it's like, okay, how can I shift this and reframe this in a way, because it is literally eating me alive. Yeah. So I'm like, okay, well, you know what? I had a mother who loved me deeply until I was 12, and I know what it's like to feel real love. I got picked on a bunch, didn't have a lot of friends, but who's friends with that many people from elementary and high school anyway?
Yeah. And it probably made you more independent.
I think part of that, like, I got picked on and like whatever, but I think I'm actually probably funnier because of it. Like, I think I have a great sense of humor, and I don't think I would have had that if I didn't experience those things.
So you're saying like reframing your like past stuff. I think that's what it was like leading to.
Yeah.
I also found like when you started putting things in action, that's what I was asking you, because like sometimes we process things, and then some therapists don't like say the kind of like why they're doing that with the client, and then at the end they're just like the client's opening up, and then they're like, okay, bye, see you next week.
See ya.
Yeah, and it's like,
like,
what do I do
okay.
with that now? So I like to always like at the end be like, okay, so let's process through how are you feeling, and now I want you to do this. And I would give like just simple tasks like that, like meditate, gratitude, like applying, maybe they talked about something like that they were angry about, and then give them some like practice on, processing through that anger, just so they see like they're putting it in action and there's actually a point of all of it. Because otherwise, like, it is heavy, and then
Otherwise, why?
you don't know what to do with it.
Just like
you're
open
really
my
doing
heart
work,
up.
and like really being honest with your therapist.
Yeah.
It's like it can be heavy.
Yeah, and it should be heavy at times, but you should just be able to know what to do when it does get too heavy outside, I guess.
I was just wondering, like, when am I going to stop feeling this way? Because I never really, like, I'll always have, like, I think, like, everybody, like, ups and downs, right? Like, it's just, like, one of those Q9 things, like, how many days a week do you feel down? Or, like, how many days a week do you feel anxious? It's, like, that type of thing. But, like, this was, like, a long stint of time where, like, I just felt, like, bad. And it's, like, I was doing therapy and doing a lot of work in it. And so it was just strange. I feel like that's my personal belief, is that like you need both. I don't know though,
because the therapy room is just practice. So apply it out in the real world.
You gotta apply it,
right?
Yeah, and when you got
That's
the
true.
meditation coach, when you're doing gratitude, you're applying all of it. So I think that
Like getting in your body is really, I think, is really important. And like meditating is getting in your body. Going on a walk is inside your body. Like there are some clients that we do not do sessions in a room. They need to go on a walk, and I love it because I also want to go on a walk.
Yeah.
So it kind of works out.
Yeah,
It's actually like a win-win.
It's hard to open up sometimes in just sitting in front of someone.
Yeah,
So
like we have like all this nervous energy,
Yeah.
and like sometimes I have nervous energy just from like the way that I exist in the world, and so sometimes it's nice, like, yeah, let's go on a walk. And sometimes I can't keep up with them; they're walking so fast, which tells me something. I wonder why. What's going on? Why are you walking so fast? Are you racing me? Like, what's happening? Like, oh well, this happened, and then that kind of gives you even more clues and like more ways to observe your clients.
It's true. I also like what you said about like reframing your negative experiences, right, into positive. I feel like it reminds me of that Man's Search for Meaning. Have you guys read that?
I haven't read it yet.
Okay.
that was by Viktor Frankl.
Yeah,
right? Viktor
that
E.
one's
Frankl.
really good.
That one's like he was like in a Jewish concentration camp, and he's like and survived. It was a really good book. I thought they made all like don't they make or at least used to make all like therapists read that book, right?
It was. I read it in school. Yeah, I read it in a mental health class, and it was basically all about even in the worst circumstance, right?
You
The
can be happy.
Holocaust, of course, you can find meaning for your suffering and find, and he was like a doctor, I think. So he was like helping other people during that time, even while he was in the concentration camp. And he found that everyone who found a meaning in it, even in that terrible experience, was resilient.
Yeah.
And so like, that's what I try to tie in a lot with, because these clients have been through the worst trauma, and I can't even try to say like I know what they're experiencing, but it's if they can find some way to find some meaning towards why they're suffering and use that to help people, that can help them survive and be resilient. Yeah, it gives them purpose, meaning, all of it.
Purpose is important.
I think that's why they probably tell people to read it, because I think without purpose, like, of course people are going to turn to drugs, or their mental health is going to deteriorate, and all
It's a
of
pretty
that.
good book too.
Yeah.
It's like
We should actually require people to read it here.
I don't know if they'll be able to.
I don't know if maybe I'll share about it in a group.
Yeah, there we go.
There we go.
Just make a
The
little
Spark
like
Notes,
do a
Spark Notes.
Spark Notes group on it. One of the just 1 second. Where are we at? We're at on time.
You're about an hour.
An hour. Oh, we're already an hour in. Oh shit! But then like so mine is probably like 10, right? Okay, so one thing that I really wanted to go over just for like the holidays and people who might be dealing with family, like what is your, I know that what you do has a little bit to do with family relations, right?
Mm-hmm.
Did you want to go into that a little bit?
Yeah. I will never give advice on what any individual should do in a family setting on the holidays, because everyone is
Sure.
wildly different.
Just education.
No, I know. I like to give little asterisks before I go into things. So my little asterisk, that was my asterisk. But sometimes holidays, it's helpful just to be like, this is just another Wednesday.
Mm-hmm.
If you can.
If you can. We'll go through the different options. I love options. I'm an option queen, right? So number one, sometimes if you have the option, or especially if people are alone on the holidays and they really don't have anywhere to go, and if they're not a part of any community, and if it's something that really drags on them, it's like, if there is any way, if you have the capacity to be like, today is just a Wednesday, today is just Thursday. But in those family dynamics, when we have the cousin that drives us insane, our moms and dads who are like blowing us up with questions, and we get like back into like kid mode where we're like, oh, please don't touch me. Like everyone's hugging you, and like you're like, I don't want to be hugged anymore. All these things. Try and establish boundaries, I would say, if possible. Also, don't push yourself to what you know is going to put you beyond the brink. So if you know that going to grandma and grandpa's house is going to make you want to, like, especially those of us that are people that are in recovery, like, if you know going to someone's house is going to destroy you and that you're going to want to run to the liquor store, just don't go. And yeah, there might be repercussions to that, but you have to weigh out what's it costing me? What's it worth to me? Am I able to handle myself? Am I not? Or maybe if you can seek out if there's a certain family member that you do connect with. Maybe like, hey, I know I have to go to Christmas dinner, but can you be like my support throughout this? Like, hey, like, these things really bother me and I want to go, but I don't know how to like handle that. So trying to find like someone that you can kind of work with. Mm-hmm. And then last but not least, try and invite that creating space between all of the previous experiences and then what's happening in the present moment. Like, I think objective observation is amazing. So you go in a room, there's like 10 people, you hate 8 of them, but they're all your family members and you can't not go because you promised your mom that you'd be there that Christmas. And so when people start talking, it's like, okay, what is actually happening right now? So like this, we're not filming a podcast. Mm-hmm. The only thing that's happening right now is there are 3 bodies, well, 5, these guys too, are in a room, and there are 4 walls, and that is it. Literally nothing else is happening. Everything else is what we attach to it. So like when your aunt is being annoying and like asking me why, oh, look, you've gained weight, California, I'm just like, oh, instead it's like, no, I am literally just a body and she's a body and we're in this room and she is just like speaking at me and I am just here and there's a cabinet, so like taking those times to ground yourself and okay, what is actually happening versus what am I making my meaning making that I'm doing.
It's like a form of meditation almost.
Mm-hmm. That's right. That's what I got. Do you guys have anything you want to add as far as those with families and holidays?
I don't. I'm not the best to ask though.
I think just try to look for the positives.
Yeah.
Like, keep it simple. Like, they're gonna be saying stuff, but guess what? You don't see them all the time. Mm-hmm. Maybe you do. I don't know. But a lot of the times you don't see them all the time. So appreciate the time together. Eat the pie. Go home. Yep. It doesn't have to be that serious.
Right.
But I like that. Like, don't attach yourself to things. It's kind of the same concept. Yeah.
I like that. Sweet.
Or don't go.
That's or just don't go. Whatever.
So any closing statements or words of wisdom about any of the subjects we talked about?
Let's think. In the spirit of the yoga conversation, reminding ourselves that everything is temporary. Yes. And so the idea of hold on tightly, let go lightly. So when things are good, love it, be a part of it. But when they're not there anymore, just let them go. So it's all temporary.
Thank you. I
Thanks,
learned
guys.
a lot.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Cool.